Hello, my name is Veronica Wilson, and I am doing my study on a flipped classroom for my practicum in early childhood education at Arkansas State University. My topic of interest is a flipped classroom. My research question is, can a flipped classroom increase participation, engagement, and learning in an early childhood education classroom? So what exactly is a flipped classroom? Some key points. What is now done at school is done at home, and homework is now done at school. It goes from more of a I do, we do, you do to a you do, we do, I do classroom. Changes the teacher from a guide on the side instead of a sage on the stage. Guide on the side provides students and assistants and corrections to explore the content and independently or within a group. The philosophy behind the flipped classroom is so that teachers can now spend more time one-on-one or in small groups with other students who may not understand or who may need more work. It also allows students who do understand the content to move on a little bit quicker. It is now replacing traditional lectures with student-centered learning strategies such as active learning, discussions, problem-based learning, and other forms of group work and peer instructions. Content delivery is more outside of the classroom and often through videos or pre-class readings. How to implement a flipped classroom. First, you want to figure out what topics you want to flip. Then you want to locate the resources that are going to be made available to your students. You want to include incentives for students to complete the work, such as a quiz or writing assignment, and provide an in-class activities for students to apply the content they learned outside of class. Research findings. Advantages to a flipped classroom include differentiation for all students. It can be more technology-based, movies, videos, projects. Includes more collaboration, student centers, deeper understanding, participation, better preparation for content, more problem-based learning for students, real-world connections, more small group and one-on-one time with the teacher, and communication and connection between student, parent, and teachers. There are some disadvantages, though. Students may not be able to have access to technology or the internet. There could be a lack of motivation on the outside. Students may learn better from lecture-style classes or lessons. Could take up a lot of time to implement or get used to. Teachers have to be well prepared and organized. It may become overwhelming, and it may be too much time in front of a screen, and students still have homework. Flipped, flexible environment, learning culture, intentional content, professional educator. The flipped classroom is one model that makes students more active and interactive both in the classroom and outside. Research has suggested that 67 reported improvements in student performance and 80% reported improvements in student engagement. Due to structural differences of the flipped classroom model, students become more aware of their own learning processes than students in a more traditional setting. Implementation of methodology and interventions. Hypothesis. Can having early childhood education students participate in a flipped classroom and having the ability to prepare for class by watching videos, doing activities at home, or playing games increase engagement, participation, and ultimately learning inside the classroom? My adjusted timeline for my study. In week 1, there will be a standardized test for the pre-assessment. It will have 8 questions. Every student will take it, and it will be one-on-one with the teacher. They will also have an online survey pre-assessment, 4 questions. Every student will take it on Google Forms about what is or if they are interested in participating in a flipped classroom. There will be an informative flipped classroom letter to the parents about the expectations of their students and the parents themselves, and the contact information of me. The students will participate in a trial run through the expectations for themselves and how to complete their checklist. In week 2, students will be able to get their first checklist. They will be doing check for understandings at the beginning of every class period, whether it be thumbs up, thumbs down, a rating scale of 0 to 5 of their understanding of content, and manipulative problem. They will have their test analyzed, and it will be used to help plan lessons and activities for classes. There will also be interventions such as small groups, one-on-one with a teacher, and parent contact throughout week 2. During week 3, checklist number 2 will be distributed. Check for understandings will be done at the beginning of every class period. Interventions will continue, and more hands-on activities during the class. During week 4, this will be the last checklist that will be distributed. Check for understandings and interventions will continue, along with hands-on activities during class. The standardized tests post-assessment and the online survey post-assessment, both that were given in week 1 will be given again in week 4. Raw data, interventions, and analysis. I wanted to make sure that I was consistent, accurate, reliable, and using multiple sources of data to be collected. So for my pre-assessment data, I used online surveys, checklist, check for understandings, parent contact, and standardized test. With my online surveys, it allowed students to answer honestly and openly without peer influence. I can assess students' attitudes, engagement, behaviors, and feelings by using the online surveys, and I can assess the parents' feelings and thoughts about a flipped classroom and their students as well. For my student checklist, I was able to give clear guidelines on what is expected of them, allowing freedom to move throughout the work and activities at their pace, still staying within the scope of the lessons, and puts responsibility and accountability into the students' hands. Standardized tests, formative assessments, and summative assessments. I can collect grades from ticket in the doors, check for understandings, tests, and quizzes. I can compare these with the traditional classroom setting, and then I can also determine if a flipped classroom has increased learning, engagement, and participation. Parent contact. I can provide a parent with information on how their child is doing, whether it's strengths with weaknesses, difficulties, positives. I can help build a positive relationship between home and school and open up the line of communication with parent, student, and teacher. My pre-assessment raw data. The standardized test, the pre-assessment, again, it was 8 questions. All 6 students were able to take it. They did it one-on-one with me. Because I was doing kindergarten students, I was able to read the question to them and have them physically count out whatever we were doing. So with question 1, they would count out 11 cubes. Number 2, they would count how many circles there were, and so forth. With that, the results were, with the 6 students, the lowest test score was 2 points out of 8. The highest was 6 points out of 8. Braden got 2, Chris got 4, Mackenzie got 2, Jonathan got 3, Joshua got 3, and Madison got 6. Correct. With the online survey, the students were given 4 questions. Do you think a flipped classroom sounds fun? Do you think a flipped classroom sounds like a lot of work? How do you feel about being in a flipped classroom? And then would you want to participate in a flipped classroom? The results were 3 students said it sounded like too much work and they were not interested in participating. 4 students said it sounded like fun. A couple were unsure, did not think it sounded fun. 3 students were willing to participate, and then the feeling towards a flipped classroom were 4 students were excited. There were a few students who were on the fence because they thought it sounded like a lot of work to be doing at home, and they just wanted to go home and play. Parent contact, I just write down, the student name, who I contacted, and what we talked about throughout the week. Checklist 1 consisted of, I started off very, very small with only 3 activities. So every night, students would do 2 to 3 of these activities every night with a parent. Same thing with week 2. as each week progressed, I added a little bit more onto the checklist to give a variety and to be able to mix things up every night with the students and the parents at home. Week 3 was the same way. Found a different video to incorporate, and as the weeks went along, I increased from counting to 10 to 15 to 20, or from 5 to 10 to 15. I was able, when students were bringing in their checklists at the end of the week, I would just mark off what the students who brought back their checklist. The interventions that I used throughout the study were hands-on activities, one-on-one with the teacher. I used technology. I used Check for Understanding, small groups, parent contact. All of these helped me to be able to keep track of my students' progress and growth and participation in the flipped classroom. Parent contact was huge for me because it opened up a line of communications. Parents were able to ask questions, express their concerns, any problems or comments that they had towards the flipped classroom or activities that their students were doing at home. I contacted parents at least once a week for a 5 to 10 minute conversation on the phone, or if I got to see them in person. Parents were being able to stay informed about the classroom activities, the weekly checklist, strengths and weaknesses, expectations, and overall growth and progress of their student. It also helped to increase parent involvement. Hands-on activities, completed weekly checklists, taking responsibility for the learning at home. Did they do well on the Check for Understandings? Deeper understandings of the skills and content, using more manipulatives like cubes, pennies, blocks, flip charts, and dominoes. Hands-on activities were done for 15 to 30 minutes daily. This helped to keep the kids more incentive into doing their checklists at home. The Check for Understandings, they're a quick, formative assessment. They were daily at the beginning of the class, whether it was pair, share, thumbs up, thumbs down, Fistify, the rating scale, manipulative problems with blocks and cubes or pennies. So students were able to do a problem very, very quickly right in front, and I could see who understood or who may have needed more help that day. The post-assessment data, I wanted to remember consistent, accurate, reliable, and have multiple sources. So again, we used the online surveys, student checklists, Check for Understandings, parent contact, and standardized tests to compare the pre and post assessments. So the post assessment raw data was the standardized test. Again, the same test was given one-on-one with the teacher, and we were able to make sure that teacher, independently. And so the students did a lot better the second time around. Braden got 6 points, Chris got 8 points, Mackenzie got 4, Jonathan 7, Joshua 6, and Madison 8. So the online survey post-assessment was the same questions. I worded it a little bit differently because it was now talking past tense about participating in the flipped classroom. So, do you think a flipped classroom was fun? Was a flipped classroom a lot of work? How do you feel about being in a flipped classroom? And did you like participating in a flipped classroom? With the post-assessment of the online survey, a lot of the students said no, it was not a lot of work. Everyone said it sounded fun. 5 more students were saying that 5 total students said they wanted to participate, and 5 students said that they were willing to participate in another flipped classroom. There was 1 student who said they were on the fence about willingness to participate or wanting to participate in a flipped classroom, and that was because he, the first 2 weeks, he did not turn in his checklist, so he was very limited on being able to participate in the hands-on activities because he had to do the checklist during class. Parent contact, again, was just used to make sure that parents were informed and involved in their students' activities and progress throughout the week. And so parent contact was huge for me to making sure that children were still doing their work at home, or if parents had any issues or problems, that they could talk to me about what was going on, what they were seeing, and what they felt or what they needed to do at home.